On March 15, 1944, within the austere, meticulously organized Naval Intelligence Headquarters in Tokyo, Commander Atsuzo Kurihara stared at the latest batch of intercepted U.S. Marine communications. A man whose career was a testament to the intricate dance of ciphers and signal analysis, Kurihara found himself confronted not by a complex code, but by an absolute, impenetrable void. The transmissions, sourced from the escalating campaigns across the Marshall Islands, were a cacophony of guttural bursts and unintelligible murmurs, a linguistic fortress that had unequivocally defied every attempt by Japan's most elite cryptographers. This was no mere encryption, it was a fundamental, baffling barrier. Kurihara, and indeed the entirety of Imperial Japanese intelligence, was utterly bewildered, struggling against a communications medium that behaved unlike any known human language, yet was clearly conveying critical operational data across the Pacific theater. The formidable Japanese intelligence apparatus, renowned for its ingenuity and relentless pursuit of enemy secrets, found itself deafened and blind, facing an unforeseen and profoundly critical shift in the strategic landscape of the Pacific War. Yet, the very source of this impenetrable silence for the Japanese was not a new cipher machine or an advanced encryption algorithm, but something far older, more organic, and profoundly unexpected. To comprehend this radical shift in intelligence warfare, we must zoom out from the war room's despair and delve into the genesis of this inviolable secret, a linguistic anomaly forged in the remote, sweeping landscapes of the American Southwest. This was the Navajo language, or as its people called it, Diné Bizaad. It was less a mere dialect and more a linguistic fortress, a sprawling, complex system of sounds and grammar that had evolved in relative isolation for centuries. Its structure defied easy categorization by Western linguistic standards, presenting an almost insurmountable barrier to outsiders. Diné Bizaad was tonal, meaning the pitch or inflection of a word could entirely alter its meaning, a subtle yet critical distinction that even highly trained ears found nearly impossible to discern without years of immersion. Moreover, it was a profoundly verb-centric language, its grammar a labyrinth of intricate conjugations, prefixes, and suffixes that conveyed nuanced information through a single word, making direct translation a monumental, often impossible task. Crucially, this linguistic anomaly existed almost entirely as an oral tradition. There was no widespread written alphabet, no published dictionaries, and virtually no external documentation. For generations, its knowledge had been passed down through spoken word within the tightly knit community of the Navajo Nation. These very characteristics, its inherent complexity, its lack of a written form, and its profound isolation, had, in a dominant culture focused on standardization and assimilation, often been perceived as vulnerabilities, even markers of a primitive tongue. But as the tides of global war washed across the Pacific, these perceived weaknesses, with a profound and ironic twist of fate, metamorphose into its greatest strengths, transforming Diné Bizaad into an impregnable shield against the most sophisticated intelligence operations of its day. The desperate struggle within the Japanese intelligence headquarters, a battle against an unseen linguistic fortress, found its genesis far across the Pacific, not in a grand strategic directive, but in the unlikely vision of a civilian. The year was 1941, the ashes of Pearl Harbor still settling, and the United States was galvanized for a global conflict. It was amidst this maelstrom of urgency that Philip Johnston, a man whose life had uniquely prepared him for this moment, stepped forward. Johnston was no military officer, no cryptographer by trade. His credentials stemmed from a childhood spent on the Navajo Reservation in Arizona, the son of Protestant missionaries. There, he had not merely learned the Navajo language, Diné Bizaad, but had absorbed its very essence, its intricate rhythms and profound complexities, alongside its native speakers. He understood, unlike virtually any other outsider, that this was not merely a dialect, but a linguistic anomaly, a fortress of sound and structure utterly alien to European and Asian tongues. It possessed no written form, no common alphabet, and its tonal nuances were a labyrinth to the uninitiated. Recognizing the urgent need for secure communication in the burgeoning Pacific theater, Johnston saw in this obscure tribal language an untapped strategic asset. On a cool spring day in 1942, He presented his audacious proposal to Major General Clayton B. Vogel, the commanding general of Amphibious Corps Pacific Fleet. The idea was simple, yet revolutionary. Use Navajo speakers to transmit tactical messages. The skepticism was palpable. Military communications, after all, were the domain of sophisticated machines and cipher keys, not an ancient oral tradition. Yet, Johnston's gambit carried a calculated risk. He pointed to the largely forgotten efforts of the Choctaw and Cherokee Code Talkers during the First World War, whose indigenous languages had briefly bewildered German intelligence. But the Navajo language, he argued, was exponentially more complex, more isolated, and thus more impenetrable. He posited that the Japanese, who had meticulously studied English, German, and even minor European languages, would possess no phonetic or structural framework to even begin to decode Diné-Bizaad. His proposal was a challenge to established communication norms, a radical departure from the reliance on mechanical encryption. It was an act of profound strategic foresight, daring to believe that an ancient, marginalized tongue could become the cutting edge of modern warfare. With Johnston's audacious vision greenlit, the theoretical prowess of Diné-Bizaad was poised to transform into concrete strategic advantage. The first contingent of 29 Navajo recruits, young men drawn from scattered reservations, arrived at Camp Elliott, California in May 1942. Among them was Chester Nez, a figure whose quiet determination would become emblematic of the entire cohort. These were not seasoned cryptographers, nor were they codebreakers. They were Marines, tasked with forging a linguistic weapon from the very essence of their heritage. The ensuing 8 weeks were a crucible of clandestine work, a period of intense, almost monastic dedication. Far from the conventional ciphers reliant on machines or complex algorithms, this code was to be organic, residing solely in human memory and the nuanced structure of an ancient language. The process involved 2 primary, interwoven tasks. First, the recruits systematically developed a lexicon of military terminology, meticulously crafting descriptive Navajo equivalents for English military concepts that had no direct translation. A submarine, for instance, became Beish Law, iron fish. A hand grenade was Nimasiyazi, small potato. The code for a bomb, Aya Atehi, metal egg, was not merely a translation, but a poetic yet precise evocation of its form and function. This was not a simple word-for-word substitution, it was a profound act of linguistic invention, transforming the abstract machinery of modern warfare into vivid, culturally resonant imagery. The second critical component was the alphabet system. Since Diné-Bizaad had no standardized written form, the Code Talkers devised a system where specific Navajo words represented individual English letters. For example, A might be represented by a word meaning ant, B by bear, and so on. To further complicate decryption, multiple Navajo words were assigned to some frequently used English letters, demanding yet another layer of memorization and real-time selection by the sender. This dual-layered linguistic architecture, combining metaphorical military terms with an alphabet of descriptive Navajo words, created a system of unparalleled semantic complexity. Every recruit committed these extensive vocabularies and substitution tables to memory, a vast mental database protected by the very structure of their language. There were no codebooks to be captured, no physical keys to be stolen. The code existed as a living, breathing entity within the minds of the men who spoke it. This was ingenuity under extreme pressure, a forensic examination of cultural heritage for its tactical utility. In the austere barracks of Camp Elliott, the very essence of Navajo identity was meticulously weaponized, transforming a language previously suppressed in American schools into an impregnable fortress against the most advanced signals intelligence of the Empire of Japan. October 1942. The malarial jungles and contested beachheads of Guadalcanal seethed under a relentless rain of artillery and small arms fire. For the Imperial Japanese forces, desperately clinging to their foothold on the island, the battle was a brutal test of attrition and endurance. Yet amidst the fury of combat, a new insidious problem began to plague their intelligence officers: the uncanny speed and inscrutability of American communications. In the command bunkers, illuminated by the flickering glow of tactical maps, Japanese cryptographers wrestled with intercepted U.S. Marine radio traffic. They had grown accustomed to the laborious process of breaking American codes, a cat-and-mouse game of encryption and decryption. But now, a new, perplexing auditory phenomenon dominated the airwaves. Operators, straining through static, reported hearing a rapid, rhythmic stream of what could only be described as utterly alien sounds. It was a cacophony of guttural syllables, tonal shifts, and complex inflections that bore no resemblance to English, nor to any known European or Asian language they had ever encountered. It was, to their mounting frustration, completely unintelligible. This torrent of seemingly random noise, dismissed by many bewildered Japanese listening post personnel as mere gobbledygook or primal shouts, was, in fact, the inaugural deployment of America's linguistic secret weapon. The first contingent of 15 Navajo Code Talkers, their induction having begun just months prior, were now embedded with Marine units across the island. Operating under the constant threat of enemy fire and the oppressive humidity, these young men relayed vital tactical information with unprecedented speed and accuracy. From "send ammo to the front lines" to "enemy forces dug in on the eastern flank," messages that would have taken traditional encryption methods hours to encode, transmit, and decode were now delivered in mere minutes or even seconds. The contrast was stark and devastating. While Japanese commanders struggled with fragmented intelligence, often relying on outdated reports or slow, vulnerable encrypted communications, the U.S. Marines moved with a newfound cohesion. Their operational commands, troop movements, and artillery requests flowed seamlessly, like an invisible current guiding their every action. Japanese intelligence, investing significant resources into understanding their adversary's signals, initially theorized that the Americans were employing a newly devised, incredibly complex machine code, or perhaps even a primitive form of prearranged, meaningless chatter designed solely to confuse. The very notion that an indigenous language, once suppressed and marginalized within America itself, could become such an impenetrable military asset was simply beyond their comprehension. This fundamental underestimation, born of cultural bias and a rigid adherence to conventional cryptographic theory, ensured that the ghost of Guadalcanal would continue to haunt them, an unassailable enigma whispering tactical defeats across the airwaves. The bewildering silence from the American communications, an impenetrable wall of sound to Japanese cryptographers, had bred a corrosive desperation within the imperial intelligence apparatus. The frustration was palpable, a strategic void where crucial information should have been. Then, a glimmer of hope, sharp as a bayonet, presented itself. On the desolate battlefields of the Pacific, amidst the chaos of a skirmish, Japanese forces captured a U.S. Marine. This was not just any Marine, he was Navajo. This lone captive, Private Joe Kalyuma, represented everything the Japanese had been seeking. Here, they believed, was the key to unlocking the unbreakable code that had so consistently thwarted their strategic intelligence. Interrogation was swift, brutal, and relentless. Japanese officers, convinced they held the ultimate prize, subjected Kalyuma to a systematic ordeal designed to extract every secret. They pressed him, not with physical pain alone, but with psychological torment, demanding the meaning of the strange sounds, the utterly alien gibberish that flowed across American radio waves. They were certain this man, a native speaker of the very language in question, possessed the Rosetta Stone to their strategic blind spot. But Kalyuma possessed no such key. The profound irony, a cruel twist for his captors, was that while he was indeed Navajo, he had never been trained as a code talker. His knowledge of the Navajo language was innate, a birthright, but the specialized military code, with its carefully crafted substitutions for military terms and its structured alphabet, was an entirely different construct. Kalyuma could not reveal what he did not know. The words he spoke under duress were simply the common tongue of his people, devoid of any military cipher, and therefore meaningless to his interrogators in their specific quest. His resilience, born not of defiance but of sheer inability to comply, only fueled the interrogators' escalating fury and despair. They battered him, starved him, and isolated him, their methods growing more savage with each passing hour of fruitless questioning. They threw every known technique at him, convinced he was stubbornly withholding vital intelligence. Yet, Kalyuma continued to offer only the pure, unadulterated Navajo language, utterly baffling his captors. This was not the sophisticated cipher they expected. It was something far more fundamental, far more impenetrable. The psychological impact on both sides was profound. For Kalyuma, it was an ordeal of unimaginable terror and physical anguish, surviving a hell of mistaken identity. For the Japanese intelligence officers, it was a descent into a new stratum of frustration. Their initial triumph, their certainty of a breakthrough, slowly eroded into a grudging, horrifying realization. This was not a simple language being encrypted. This was the language itself, in its raw, complex form, acting as the code. The sheer linguistic impenetrability, combined with the code talkers' unique training, meant that even a native speaker untrained in the specific military lexicon could not betray its secrets. The code was not a cipher to be broken. It was a fortress of sound, built on the very foundations of an ancient, vibrant culture, and its walls were utterly unscalable. The undeniable, battlefield-proven efficacy of the Navajo Code, particularly in the initial, crucible engagements of the Pacific Theater, rapidly transcended mere tactical advantage. It became a strategic imperative. The small, pioneering contingent of code talkers whose linguistic prowess had utterly baffled Japanese cryptographers represented an untapped vein of military intelligence. This revelation demanded a massive, systematic expansion. To meet the escalating demands of the island-hopping campaign, the U.S. Marine Corps established a formal code talker school at Camp Pendleton in 1943. Here, the initial cohort of 29 was augmented by hundreds more young Navajo men, meticulously selected and rigorously trained. Their curriculum was intense, not only ingraining the core code, the 260-word lexicon, and the phonetic alphabet, but also fostering the rapid-fire mental agility required to translate complex tactical commands under duress. This was not a static language. It was a living, evolving system, continually adapting to the brutal inventiveness of total war. As new weapon systems, tactical doctrines, and strategic objectives emerged, the code talkers, in collaboration with linguists, devised new terms. A submarine became an iron fish, a tank a tortoise, and a hand grenade a potato. Perhaps the most stark illustration of this linguistic dynamism and its critical role in the war's clandestine technological race came with the advent of the atomic bomb. Long before its operational deployment, as details of the Manhattan Project remained shrouded in absolute secrecy, the code talkers were tasked with creating a secure term for this unprecedented weapon. They settled upon metal eggs, a simple yet profoundly effective descriptor that would have resonated with the Japanese as innocuous, yet clearly communicated its devastating payload to Allied forces. This capacity for organic growth within a highly structured military application stood in stark contrast to the strategic rigidity of their adversaries. Japanese intelligence, despite allocating immense resources and deploying their most skilled cryptographers, remained locked in a futile struggle against what they perceived as an indecipherable torrent of nonsense. Their traditional cryptographic methods, honed over decades, were designed to break ciphers and dissect linguistic patterns. They were, however, utterly unprepared for a language that was not a code per se, but a linguistic fortress built upon an unwritten, highly complex, and geographically isolated tongue. While the Allies demonstrated an agile, adaptive ingenuity, embracing unconventional solutions and leveraging cultural diversity, the Japanese remained bound by conventional thinking. This adherence to established doctrines in the face of an existential threat proved to be a critical, ultimately insurmountable, strategic vulnerability in the technological arms race that defined the Pacific conflict. Deep within the labyrinthine corridors of imperial Japanese intelligence, a profound strategic darkness had begun to descend. While the American Marines, empowered by their unseen linguistic weapon, moved with unprecedented speed and coordinated precision across the island chains of the Pacific, their Japanese adversaries found themselves increasingly paralyzed, ensnared in a code of their own making, a code they could not break. The persistent, desperate efforts of Japanese cryptographers to unravel these enigmatic transmissions were relentless. Teams of highly skilled linguists fluent in every known Allied language meticulously analyzed the torrent of intercepted radio traffic. They deployed sophisticated frequency analysis, searched for common linguistic structures, and painstakingly cataloged every unusual sound pattern. Captured American personnel, often subjected to intense interrogation, were questioned about unusual dialects or communication methods. Yet, each attempt, however systematic or brutal, crashed against an impenetrable wall of sound. The rapid-fire, guttural cadences, devoid of any discernible European linguistic root, defied every conventional cryptographic method, pushing the boundaries of their analytical capabilities into realms of utter futility. This systematic failure generated a profound cognitive dissonance within the Japanese high command. Their formidable intelligence apparatus, which had prided itself on its efficiency and reach, was rendered impotent by a seemingly primitive, unwritten language. The frustration reached a fever pitch, transforming into a chilling strategic admission. Faced with the catastrophic implications of their intelligence void, Japanese officers would later confess to fighting in blindness, their operational decisions often little more than desperate gambles in the dark, lacking critical, real-time battlefield intelligence. The inability to penetrate these communications became a devastating, insurmountable vulnerability for the Japanese high command, a stark testament to the singular, unheralded power of the Navajo language. From the genesis of its intricate design, the Navajo Code was forged not merely as a linguistic curiosity, but as a weapon destined for the crucible of the Pacific. Its true proving ground and where its strategic impact became undeniable was across the island chains that bore witness to the most brutal fighting of the war. Here, amid the coral strongholds and volcanic sands, the Code Talkers ascended from simple communicators to indispensable architects of victory. At Tarawa in November 1943, the U.S. Marines faced an entrenched Japanese defense that exacted a horrific toll. Amidst the chaos of the amphibious assault, where conventional radio communications were jammed or compromised, the Navajo Code Talkers provided the vital artery of intelligence. Operating under relentless fire, they coordinated landing waves, directed naval gunfire onto Japanese pillboxes, and relayed critical reconnaissance on enemy positions. Their rapid, secure transmissions cut through the fog of war, often circumventing delays that would have cost countless lives. Without them, the intricate dance of an opposed landing might well have faltered, turning a hard-won victory into a catastrophic quagmire. The relentless advance continued to Saipan in the summer of 1944. Here, the Code Talkers proved instrumental in mitigating the devastating impact of Japanese banzai charges. As fanatic enemy soldiers hurled themselves against American lines, the Code Talkers swiftly transmitted warnings, called in artillery barrages, and coordinated counterattacks, maintaining a coherent command structure amidst the frantic melee. Their secure voice links ensured that commanders received real-time intelligence on enemy movements, allowing for rapid redeployment and effective suppression fire that preserved the Allied front. Palaleo, a battle characterized by its subterranean warfare and unexpectedly prolonged resistance, further underscored the Code's value. In the labyrinthine caves and bunkers, where isolated Marine units often fought for days without direct contact, the Navajo Code Talkers bridged the communication gap. They guided artillery strikes onto hidden Japanese strongpoints, reported on troop movements within the complex cave systems, and relayed urgent requests for supplies, often operating just yards from enemy positions. This ability to maintain secure communication between disparate, beleaguered units proved crucial in systematically dismantling a deeply entrenched and fanatical defense. But it was during the hellish 36-day struggle for Iwo Jima in early 1945 that the Navajo Code Talkers etched their most profound legacy. On an island where every inch of ground was contested and casualties mounted at an appalling rate, the sheer volume and speed of critical intelligence exchanges were staggering. 6 Navajo networks were established, transmitting more than 800 messages in the first 2 days alone. They directed naval bombardment, coordinated ground troop maneuvers over treacherous terrain, and called in air support with a precision and speed that astonished those witnessing it. Major General Howard Connor, commander of the V Amphibious Corps, famously declared, "Were it not for the Navajos, the Marines would never have taken Iwo Jima." General Holland M. Smith, commander of the Fleet Marine Force Pacific, echoed this sentiment, stating that the Navajo Code was the only spoken code the Japanese never broke. Finally, in the brutal campaign for Okinawa, the largest amphibious assault of the Pacific War, the Code Talkers sustained communication across an immense battlefield involving multiple divisions and inter-service coordination. Their secure transmissions were the backbone of command and control, enabling the rapid deployment of forces, the coordination of complex logistical operations, and the swift adaptation to the Japanese strategy of tenacious attritional defense. For the Japanese High Command, this unrelenting efficiency of Allied communication presented an insoluble strategic dilemma. General Kurihara and his cryptographers had committed immense resources to unraveling the mystery behind the U.S. Marine Corps' impenetrable transmissions. Yet, from Tarawa to Okinawa, the secure whispers of victory, delivered in a language they dismissed as utterly alien, blinded them to Allied intentions and deafened them to their tactical maneuvers. Their inability to anticipate or counter these movements led to devastating consequences, transforming every battlefield into a testament to the code's effectiveness and the profound transformative power of linguistic ingenuity in warfare. As the final brutal act of the Pacific War unfolded, a profound message of surrender echoed across the airwaves, encoded and transmitted with the same linguistic mastery that had baffled Japanese intelligence for years. On September 2, 1945, from the USS Missouri in Tokyo Bay, it was Code Talker Teddy Draper Jr. who helped relay the definitive end of hostilities. Yet for Draper and his comrades, the cessation of global conflict did not bring immediate public adulation. Instead, their extraordinary contributions were immediately swallowed by a shroud of top-secret classification. The program, deemed too vital for potential future conflicts, was locked away behind a formidable barrier of national security. Each Code Talker was sworn to an oath of absolute secrecy, a burden that weighed heavily on men who had delivered tactical miracles under fire. They returned home not as celebrated heroes with tales of their unique valor, but as quiet veterans, their most significant wartime achievements relegated to the classified archives of the U.S. military. This enforced silence created a profound, almost unbearable psychological chasm. These were individuals who had wielded their ancestral tongue, a language once suppressed by the very nation they served, as an impregnable weapon, saving thousands of lives and fundamentally altering the strategic calculus of countless battles. Yet, upon their return, many were met not with parades or public gratitude, but with the stark, unchanged realities of racial discrimination and societal marginalization. The irony was a bitter draught. They had fought valiantly to protect a nation's freedoms, only to find that nation still withholding full recognition and equality from its own indigenous champions. Their immense sacrifice, the ingenuity of their service, remained unseen, unacknowledged by the broader public for decades, a testament to a unique American heroism relegated to the shadows. The silence imposed upon the Navajo Code Talkers, a silence that had shrouded their extraordinary contributions for over 2 decades, began to fracture in 1968. It was in this year, 23 years after the guns of World War II had fallen silent, that the program was finally declassified. This act, while long overdue, marked the crucial first step on a long and often arduous journey from clandestine service to widespread recognition. The unveiling of their story was not a sudden revelation, but a gradual, painstaking process. For years, these veterans, many of whom had returned home only to face continued discrimination and a lack of understanding regarding their classified service, carried their heroism in quiet solitude. Their language, once deemed a primitive obstacle, then transformed into an impregnable weapon, now remained an unacknowledged testament to their unique sacrifice. Advocates, often family members or those who had witnessed their impact firsthand, began to champion their cause, pushing for the public acknowledgement that was rightfully theirs. Slowly, but surely, the narrative began to shift. Public perception, once clouded by the exigencies of national security and, in some quarters, by lingering prejudice, began to grasp the profound ingenuity and courage of these men. Their tale, a vibrant tapestry woven from cultural heritage and battlefield valor, emerged as one of the most compelling and unique chapters in American military history. This incremental recognition built momentum, culminating in a moment of profound national gratitude. On July 26, 2001, in a ceremony resonating with historical significance, the original 29 Navajo Code Talkers were awarded the Congressional Gold Medal, the highest civilian honor bestowed by the United States Congress. This triumph of justice, though decades in the making, stood as a powerful symbol of a nation acknowledging its debt to heroes whose deeds had remained unsung for far too long, a testament to the enduring power of truth to ultimately pierce through the veils of secrecy and time. The saga of the Navajo Code Talkers, far from concluding with the final medal ceremony, unfurled a profound legacy that continues to echo through the corridors of military strategy and societal understanding. Beyond the tactical victories it secured in the Pacific, their extraordinary contribution irrevocably transformed perceptions of indigenous languages within the national consciousness. What was once dismissed by some as an archaic relic, a barrier to assimilation, proved to be an impenetrable fortress of communication, a bellwether of a new strategic reality. The very essence of the Navajo tongue, its intricate syntax and phonetic complexity, became a weapon more potent than any newly forged steel, compelling a reevaluation of linguistic diversity as a strategic asset rather than a perceived impediment. This profound revelation extended its influence far beyond the immediate theater of war, subtly shaping the trajectory of post-war intelligence. The unparalleled success of the Code Talkers served as a stark, undeniable example of how unconventional sources, deeply rooted in cultural distinctiveness, could yield decisive advantages in the crucible of conflict. It underscored a fundamental truth, that strength could be found not just in technological supremacy or overwhelming numbers, but in the rich, often overlooked tapestry of human identity and expression. The Navajo Code Talkers stood as an eternal testament to the strength found in diversity itself, a powerful counter-narrative to any ideology that sought uniformity above all else. Their historical struggle, from initial marginalization to ultimate triumph, resonates with an enduring relevance in the modern age, underscoring a truth that has only grown more self-evident. America's true power, its deepest wellspring of ingenuity and resilience, lies precisely in its myriad voices. The once suppressed Navajo language, a language that children were once punished for speaking, now stands as a beacon, a living monument to human resourcefulness and the profound, often unexpected, sources of human strength. It is a grand finality to a tale of ingenuity, resilience, and the ultimate, undeniable tower of difference, a testament to the fact that the most potent defenses can sometimes be found in the most unexpected and beautiful forms.